Cam, yeah.
All right, you want a timer on this?
No, just give me 5 seconds.
going?
Give me
Okay.
5 seconds to air.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome, Justin, to Conversations, and to Conversations viewing audience, to Justin. And Justin's book, Just in Time, you can see, as well as the man himself out in California. Justin, you've got a hell of a life you've led, and the book is very reflective of that. Congratulations on both.
Okay, Harold, good to see you too.
Listen, maybe we could start this out, okay? You're a native New Yorker, and we're talking to you from 59th Street and 11th Avenue, so you're familiar with New York. And maybe you could fill us in. You're originally from New York, as I understand, right?
I am, and I know the diner that's over there at 59th Street and the river.
Right, yeah, right, okay, it's good. So but you've been in many places. You've had a very interesting life to lead. The book is magnificent, if I may say so, and it's filled with wisdom and wit, and I congratulate you enormously on it, on Just in Times. But maybe do share. You were born and raised, and you seem to have moved around a great deal around the world and gathered knowledge and wisdom and as you went in the various places that you've traveled. Maybe share with us your own background as you see it, and then let's talk about some of the adventures that you've done in terms of your life, but also the insights that you garnered during that process.
Okay, that sounds great, Harold.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up in the Bronx,
Yeah.
and in a multi-ethnic family of second-generation immigrants, and soon moved out and went to college for a while, and moved into the city and lived in the city for a while, and had some exposure to the underbelly of life in New York City, little gambling, a little business owning,
Right.
that kind of thing. And until I tired of the repetition of some of those activities and was looking for something more, and in that search for something more, met some people who knew things and understood things that I didn't, and was very fortunate in that regard. Some people from this country and some people from other places, and spent some time visiting those people and getting to understand that there's a whole nother level of life beneath the level of getting more reputation and getting more money and getting more everything.
Yeah, you had one chapter in there, and I forget what the term was, but you addressed it to people. I forget what your term you used, but there are people who are comfortably established materially. They don't have to be concerned with the rigors of doing what you have to do to earn a living in any direct way. I forget what the term was that you used for those people, but that interested me very much, because there are more and more people, despite the injustices that exist and have, I guess, throughout most all, and the inadequacies throughout the human experience. We've been here a couple 100,000 years as a species, I guess, and we've been able to get more and more people who might be able to be comfortably ensconced within the system that exists, rather than having to be struggling. And are you familiar with that section? That caught my attention, because I think that may be a situation for humanity writ large. The time that we're in, we may be coming to a time where more and more of the world's population will be able to be in that kind of comfortable position of not having to be concerned with the daily bread, the struggle for daily bread, or for all that accompanies it. But
yeah, I think that's a very important point, Harold.
Yeah.
And it's the challenge is really to see the repetition, and that once we become comfortable and have our grounding and have our level of success, that the challenge to see that the small alterations that we make or that we seek to make, to move to another area, to get to know new people, to get a different job of the jobs that we've gotten, really have an element of repetition in them. And it's difficult really to appreciate that these small changes really aren't going to bring us to a whole another level of depth and understanding and experience. We really have to find some way to go deeper. And I found in my life that getting to that point and having to reassess and really explore what's possible for a human being and go more in that direction. And certainly you can see from my book that I've traveled and tried so many different things, but really all as part of an exploration of seeing that there's a depth in life that ordinarily we don't make connection with because there's so much repetition in what we do. And I'm speaking as you refer to people who already have an amount of comfort and leisure and control in their lives, and that it may be when a person gets to that point, it's time to seek a different level of depth in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it may be that it's actually occurring. I'm a great fan of Bucky Fuller. I don't know if you've been involved with Bucky Fuller or not, but Bucky Fuller was somebody that I'm very inspired by and so forth. And he's made the point that through technological advancement or through the whole evolutionary process, it used to be in order to, I saw a program on television recently, on the public television, about the treatment of the people in the manor houses in Edwardian England. And they had the great manor houses for the people suffering or living in very great splendor within these manor houses. And they didn't want to be bothered or they wanted the comforts, but they didn't want to be bothered with having to have the servants that were bringing them the comfort in any direct way. So they had spiral staircases that were built into the walls of the building. And then they had people, and it was interesting because they had, for some reason in this, I remember it was a very good program. They had a lot of relatively young women, but they had to carry buckets of water up a spiral staircase within the walls of the thing to pour it into a bathtub so the Lord could get a bath. Now, almost everybody in the developed world can just, by a matter without even thinking about it, turn a tap and have clear and pure water available to them, as well as warm water so you can take a shower. So the material condition that people are coming into, a comfortable position, let's say, without having to be a struggle, is becoming more and more available through the use of the technology. And I think maybe that's something that I'm concerned with. I think we're getting to the point where we have a capability of taking care of people more and more through in the evolutionary process. Fuller said we're getting to the point where there could be actually more, and he talked about being a have and have not materially. Now, spiritually is another matter, of course, as you well know. But the idea of the material ability to take care of everybody in a way where there is enough rather than zero-sum scarcity, where if one wins, another had to lose, all of that that's been characteristic of history. Do you understand? Is there anything to that? Am I off base, or what do you think about that?
No, I think that I am also somewhat of a fan of Buckminster Fuller, yeah. And I do comply with that idea. I do recognize the necessity for sensitivity for people who haven't gotten to that point, because there are hundreds of millions of people that haven't got to that point. So we can't pretend like technology and the advances of technology has helped them in the way that they've helped so many of us.
That's the big challenge, yeah.
Keeping that understanding that we are in our position very fortunate, yeah. And not separate from those people, but because we're cognizant of their plight, it still does not put us in a position where we have to forget about that our fortunateness allows us a certain opening to something different.
Yeah,
And we could call it spiritual, could call it something of depth, but it's important for us to understand that there is a next step for people who are fortunate, and part of that next step is to take responsibility for the people who are less fortunate. But that's not the whole step. There's also another step of seeking more depth and quality in our lives in some way other than accumulating more, whether it's reputation or goods.
Or money.
Or
it
money.
Seems to be the thing that seems to be the main issue for so much of humanity now does revolve around the getting of money. It seems overwhelmingly the major thing that people have to be concerned with, and yet the capability for taking care of everybody at the level of capability that we have is growing all the time.
Right.
You know?
Well, money represents a lot for us other than the ability to buy things. Money has been put forth as the vehicle for controlling life. And whether it's succeeded in doing that or not is definitely a question worthy of exploration, because I contend that the accumulation of money requires the accumulation of insurance to make sure that money is protected, to be more isolated from people and being afraid that that money is going to be taken away from you. So there really, as money is accumulated, we don't really get the increased control and satisfaction and peace that we imagine that we're going to have. What we get is a whole nother set of problems. And if that were clearly acknowledged, then we would know that, yes, money is a factor and accumulating money has a positive effect, but there are also other dimensions in life that have to be explored. And if a person puts so much of their energy into accumulating money, they're going to ignore or really be unaware of that there is a depth in life that has nothing to do with money at all.
Absolutely well said, absolutely well said. And that we have to be concerned with what our great spiritual leaders have told us is the least among us, more than we do, and to have a sense of collective responsibility for the system that we're all part of, better than perhaps is being manifest. Seems to be wars go on, and the weapons have become so dastardly destructive now, increasingly so, that are used to have one power fight another and so forth. And I believe, I don't know if you've given it much thought, it's not a very pleasant thought, but I've seen studies that the weapon systems collectively that have developed for one power to win out against another, make the wars and the kind of things that have been so part of the human condition and history, that they finally come in their collective capability, just as the capability to provide for everybody in a material way has increased. But at the same time, the weapon systems have become so efficient that apparently, if they were to be unleashed from modeling, it could very well mean the end of the Homo sapiens species. Do you think that's the case? It certainly was not the case as recently as the Second World War or so forth, but there's something qualitatively different going on in the very times in which we've reached maturity, and so many of the youth coming up are beginning to consider what their maturity might look like, if you understand what I mean.
I hear what you're saying, and I think there's a lot to that. I think that the downside of technology is difficult to appreciate when we're focused at the upside, whether it be automobiles or microwaves or smartphones or computers, as well as the chemicals and the explosives that can do so much damage, that we're really not aware of the sophistication necessary and the wisdom necessary to operate a smartphone, and not to operate a technology, but to operate it wisely, so that people are still retaining the ability to talk to each other and not only talk over a technological vehicle, and that people are able to drive cars with an attitude of of when they're going from place to place, they are alive during that time, and it's not just dead time between going from place to place. And telephones and televisions and really every aspect of technology that has so many positive possibilities and aspects of science as well also has has to accompany the recognition that it takes wisdom and sophistication and understanding of that these things can be used in positive ways and these things can be used in self-destructive ways. And this certainly is in evidence with weapons, but it is equally in evidence in things that aren't weapons but take away a little bit of our humanity.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Fuller used to call killingry and livingry. I think he compared the two. I wonder if I could take a little point of personal note. Your book is magnificent. One of the problems is it's so well written and so full of wisdom, if I may, and insight and storytelling that is really important and so forth. The problem is I wasn't able to put it down as much as I would like to do all the things I have to do. So in a certain sense, I'm telling you, it's a very, very good book, highly recommended by me. But I wonder if I could take a point of personal privilege about the woman or the weaver. I think it was a woman weaver at Lake Titicaca.
Yes.
And it's on the cover of your book, and she was making shawls, one for representing before the birth or something, and one after the birth. And you ask her, well, why didn't you make something relevant to the time of your lifespan? And she said, it's such a short time. That was a very interesting thing. And you seem to have been able to find stories like that that bring out in the human condition, and with great wit as well. And I congratulate you on. But were you in Bolivia for a considerable period of time? But I was a couple of years at Lake Titicaca. I lived at Achacachi on the east side of the lake, if you know. Yeah. So anyway, maybe we could share. Maybe we could share the experiences we've had in the country of Bolivia, if you don't mind.
Well, I did start visiting. I had a family friend who lived right on the shore of Lake Titicaca, right on the border of Peru and Bolivia in a small town. And that family friend invited me down, and I started visiting him when I was about 12 years old.
Oh, really?
And
young.
maybe every few years in the summer after that. And the person became somewhat of my mentor. And I certainly traveled around with him. He was a weaver and also the director of their weaving co-op in the small town. And we would go around to the villages around the lake and in Bolivia in the mountains, and he would collect weavings and then gather them together and take them into Lima, Peru, and sell them for exportation around the world. And that actual story was something that happened to me, a person that I ran into, this lady weaver, when I was quite young, and obviously it made a big impression on me because I had never heard anybody say anything like that, something to the effect of these things, these cloths they call mantas, which are cloaks that they use for birth and death, but actually the time in between, very important, but not as significant as we make it according to our self-importance.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Paracas down in Peru? The mummies at Paracas?
I've traveled a good deal in Peru. I've been in the mountains. I've climbed in the mountains. I've been in the desert. I've spent probably 3 years, if you would add up all the time that I've spent in Peru. It's been a while since I've been there, Cusco, since the passing of this mentor of mine. But it is one of my favorite of places to have been to.
You've been all over the world, and you've had adventures all over the world, and you've drawn from the adventures tremendously important ethical and moral insight. And I congratulate you again on the book. It's magnificent. I think it ought to have a very wide circulation. You apparently were a fan of the character of what was his name in the mystery, or Gandalf, or the Sting. You apparently like the role
Yes.
of that. You know, and that would be a guy. They pulled off a con, right? That it's a
Exactly.
major thing. And you did some boxing and so forth. You've had a hell of an interesting life, haven't you? Yeah.
I still have
Yeah,
my life
right,
is
and it
really
continues,
equally
yeah,
interesting
yeah.
now, mostly because the people that I know and the people that have gravitated toward knowing me are explorers in their own right,
Yeah.
not only external explorers because we've gone on some good adventures together,
Mm-hmm.
mostly connected with social work and helping where help is needed,
Uh-huh.
but also the internal adventures
Yeah.
of seeing what depth human beings really are capable of.
You did some boxing, right? Was there a
I
period?
did a little boxing, yes.
Yeah. And you've grown such, you got such wisdom from it. You're now living in a paradise. I'm really sorry for the limitations of what we had, because you have had sent to me here clips of the place where you're living. It seems to me you're living in what is a very, very real paradise now in Northern California. It seems absolutely gorgeous where you're living now. Are you not caught with the travel bug? Do you want to go? Where do you want to go next? The moon or to Mars? Or, you know, you seem to have an urge to merge or to wander around or something, you know?
All right, well, first let me say that external paradise is difficult to really manifest. The area that we live in is very nature friendly, and there's grass and there's trees and there's hills, but there are people that are living in equally idyllic circumstances that are having difficulties, and their life is filled with problems, plans, and problems of relationships. So it's not only the external features of the photos that I've sent you that make this world that I'm part of so idyllic. It's really the nature of inner exploration that makes it special. And but that inner exploration, it's important that it not be isolating. So in answer to your question, every couple of years we spent a few months going to a place where people are less fortunate, whether it been the Syrian refugees or the victims of Hurricane Katrina, or people in Mexico that are having troubles, or the Burmese people on the Burmese border. We go there for a few minutes and we use our building skills, because we have developed here in this community that I live in building skills. So we've built medical clinics, and we've built improvements on houses. And so most of the exploration in terms of traveling places in the last number of years has been traveling to places in order to do that kind of assistance work and crisis intervention.
Very good for you. It's needed by all means. So much is needed. Doctors Without Borders, that sort of thing, and other things that are trying to be done. Are you? I don't. It's a Ted's tail heads question, and maybe not fair and everything. But are you? And congratulations on all that work. Lord knows it's needed, and there's so much need around the world, and the inciting, the encouraging of our great leaders invariably have been all people, even though they've been treated very badly very often by political leaders that resented or whatever, couldn't stand the things they were saying, such as, well, a couple was Jesus and Spartacus and a couple of other people who were saying, let's take care of the least among us. Most of our spiritual or meaningful leaders have said that, and it's certainly there's so much to be done that way to improve them, to improve the condition of the least among us, rather than just giving into greed and war making. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. Are you, the question I would ask you is, are you optimistic? I pose this question to you. It's one I'm concerned with and have been, is this situation, the human condition. Are you optimistic, or do you sometimes go pessimistic for, let's just say, the human prospect? Or what is your tendency in that direction?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm saying that I'm thinking that I am optimistic about the capacity of individual human beings.
Yeah.
And if it happened to come to pass that enough individual human beings sought a life of more depth and less acquisitiveness, then there could be conceivably an effect that would be broader reaching.
Yeah.
But I can't speak to that because it really has not been so much my calling or the job I feel that I have. I work with and live with and know a relatively small number of people, and I am optimistic about their possibilities because I see that the human capacity to explore inner abilities and more depth is definitely there. I would like, and part of the reason that I've written these books that I've written is because I suspect there are numerous people around the world, people that I will never meet, that have this desire for another level of depth in their life rather than repetition. And maybe something in something I've written will call their attention in this decade and next century to some desire to becoming more of an inner explorer. So I am optimistic. If I weren't optimistic about that, I wouldn't be able to write these books. But what the overall possibility is for humanity on Earth, that's just a little bit too big a question for me to address.
It is, yeah. Could you share with you were in Pakistan? I'm wondering where you have not been. I mean, you were probably, have you been on the moon yet? I don't know. You seem to have been everywhere, and everywhere you found wisdom to be found and discovered and heralded, and also spiritual qualities, and also stories that have a meaning, stories that have a moral principle. Something about a bridge. There was a thing in Pakistan where there was a bridge out or something, and it was down, I guess, in the south of Pakistan or something, and you had to get over a bridge. Could you share that? That was very insightful.
That was a very meaningful episode in my life, and it took place in Afghanistan, which is right next door.
Yeah.
But I was visiting some friends, a place that I had been before, a school in a way for consciousness, but a place I had visited before, and I was asked to. I had a vehicle, a four-wheel drive vehicle, and I was asked to drive somewhere with this friend, and we ended up going down one side of a river, and I was assured that we could cross over at the far end, and it turned out we couldn't really cross over, and that we had to go all the way back. That we had to go all the way back to where we started in order to get to this town that we wanted to get to, and I really appreciated the challenge, which is a challenge for anyone who has to do something over again that they thought they had already accomplished. And I felt the challenge of that, but I also was encouraged to take on that challenge and to learn that sometimes in order to go forward, you have to go backwards first.
But yeah, right. That's an important lesson to be learned, not by us all, including the youth coming up and everything like that. But there was one bridge was out, and you couldn't get over it, and then you had to get to another one. And that was, you were upset because you had to go back. It was going to take a lot of time or something. And then instead of just cursing it or something, you drew a very moral and relevant, realistic metaphor from that was really very interesting. And it seemed to be, you did that with practically all of the stories that are contained in this book. You took great you took great lessons from everything that you've been involved in all over a wide variety of places and incidences with a wide variety of people. It's been a very interesting life. Do you ever get tired and say, I want to stop, it's too interesting, I'm having too many adventures, and that I'm going to slow down and just sit in the hammock for a while or something, or what? I'm just saying, you've been a very busy fellow, you know?
Well, it appears so, but I have a lot of time. I don't conceive of myself as busy.
Okay.
I take a lot of time. I meditate. I walk in the woods. I sit still. I read. But let me correct myself in a way that presents a more realistic picture of at least this turning around.
Yes,
in this turning around story, there was a little cursing that took place. I was not immediately pleased with the idea of going back, but fortunately I knew someone that encouraged me, and I have been consistent and very fortunate in this life to have allies, you might say, that encouraged me. So when I looked at something in a way that was not productive, I had somebody there to remind me that there is a productive way to look at this, even though the situation may not be preferable. And I have personally taken on that role in relation to the people that I know and anybody that I might get to know, in that we can't always manipulate our external circumstances, but we can learn to look at ways to learn and grow from them. And I have certainly been in the benefit by that attitude. In terms of my wanting to rest more and do less things, most of my exploration now, or certainly a larger proportion than has been in the past, is internal exploration, meaning what a human being is internally capable of, not only through meditation, but through getting rid of obstacles to our natural state. Because in my opinion, our natural state contains a lot more goodness and kindness and giving than we understand and that we realize and that we appreciate. But that goodness and kindness has to be uncovered. So a lot of the exploration I've been part of, interspersed with external exploration, has been that internal work.
You were inspired by Gurdjieff, Ospinski, in terms of spiritual. Who are some of the people that have been inspirational to you at various stages of your life? You've been through, you were doing bookie stuff out at the racetrack for a while, and you've had a hell of an interesting life in very many things. But Gurdjieff was an inspiration, or who is something, people spiritual or material or secular, that have been inspirational to you in your maturing?
Well, learning how to learn from what a person cross paths with is a tremendously valuable skill.
And fun.
Because if a person demands that they cross paths with wisdom and insight, that's a very big demand. A lot more that a person would cross paths with has the appearance of ordinariness. But traveling in underdeveloped countries, there is a simplicity and a surrender that people manifest because of their lack of possibility of options that we have. And there is so much to learn from the acceptance of life that is available more to people in underdeveloped countries. So I've learned so much from people in less fortunate situations as I have from people who are successful and accomplished. And in terms of spiritual leaders, there are elements of people that I've learned lessons from, and some of those people would be in the category of names that have been known and people I've gotten to know, and certainly many more have been in names of people that are not known, and that people who have gathered certain amounts of wisdom in their lives and been willing to pass it on. So I have been very fortunate in that way. in that I have learned how to learn from whatever circumstances come along, and that also I have crossed paths with people that have had elements of wisdom and understanding that I've been able to been inspired by.
Well, there are many that we can draw upon, aren't there? People who've been in a spiritual tradition. Do you think the world is becoming too flippant, if that's the right attitude, toward the lessons of the spiritual leaders down through the ages that have appeared amongst us, or not? And do you think are we becoming too secular, perhaps, or too wrapped up in the material world and the demands of the material world to take time to be considering the traditions that have held for so very long, the rich traditions out of the past from India or from other places, and from our spiritual leaders? I suppose you do. Yeah.
I do think that. I think that the valuation for learning from history has definitely decreased to a point that it's even dangerous, that we don't learn from the mistakes that we've made, not only in this country, but globally. And I think that there are lessons to be learned from individuals, but a knowledge of the progression of human history seems vitally important to me. And the idea of spirituality being only a study of the present is a misunderstanding and a narrowness of the depth of human accomplishment and human error. And the only way that we can really appreciate that is by studying with some depth and understanding the history of human endeavor. I think so many accomplishments, so many mistakes and missteps would have been avoided had we not known that this identical situation out of context has been lived through before. And we know that even in our short time of Korea and Vietnam and how we dealt with the First World War and the Spanish-American War and all the political scandals we're not just seeing now for the first time, but there's a history to that. And it seems that we are oblivious to the history. There was a man who I'm sure you're familiar with, Senator Moynihan, who no longer is alive, but he was a New York senator and a historian who, whenever asked for his opinion on a subject, would give the historical context of that subject and the possible learning that comes from those subjects. And I think that we've lost the valuation for that.
We're not anchoring ourselves to the lessons of history as well as we ought, and the youth coming up and so forth. We're living for the moment too much, in a sense. Is that what you're trying to say? I
am saying that. I think living in the moment is a precious experience, but I doubt that living in the moment can preclude all the moments that preceded them.
Yeah, okay, right, very well taken. James Joyce, he's somebody that he was a pretty good writer, James Joyce, and he had a saying, history, now this is what take on history. History is a nightmare from which we're attempting to awaken. I don't know. Do you think spiritually, let's say, given all the inadequacies of often the political leadership we have to put up with, as it were, or the ridiculousness, and that massive wars, the First World War, and the wars that have been so devastating and so forth, are you optimistic? I may have asked you this before. In this year, what is it, 2017, of, I guess, the Christian era? Is that what that would be, where we're living in? Are you optimistic, or do you sometimes feel pessimistic about the human prospect? I just wonder.
Well, I see that the study of our moments of life in the present and the discovery of the obstacles to what could be a different manifestation of human activity is undervalued, and with possible change in the valuation for studying ourselves, studying for what we occupy ourselves with, and how much negativity in small ways we deal with, our lack of awareness of our condition is a problem. But I see it also as a problem that could be altered with a slight change in focus, that our priorities are changing things externally, not really understanding that there is a sea of disharmony within individual human beings, even human beings that do kind gestures toward others. And this sea of disharmony can be altered, but it requires a certain self-study for it to be altered, because we are not generally aware of the specifics of our disharmony. And we can be aware of that, and very frequently that awareness allows things to drop away. And not an agony of loss or giving up or surrender, but more seeing things as they are so that they can be left behind because they're no longer profitable or worthwhile, but more self-destructive. I am optimistic about that possibility, and that's what I represent, that's what I teach, that's what I support, and I am most optimistic about that.
You've written this book just in time. I can't praise it enough. It has tremendous insight and value. Right from the I was struck with the first chapter, the first little thing. We've had a little accident here. Okay, because it reminded me of my youth too. The one where you start the book with your viewing of television as a young boy, and maybe you could share that if you could. That's the opening salvo in the book is the study of you as about 5 years old or something, and the coming of this mysterious, wondrous thing called television, a little gray screen television. But maybe you could share that little story.
I was an extremely enthusiastic television child.
Go ahead.
Living in New York City, that's where the first station started, and I became an immediate enthusiast of everything that came across the TV. I even developed to a point where I was you might even say addicted to that TV, because it was a window on a world that was much more expanded than the world that I had, which was basically going to school and my friends and playing stickball in the street and things like that. So I was definitely enamored by watching movies of foreign places and watching documentaries about things that have taken place, the old Mike Wallace documentaries, and so many documentaries that I have watched and learned really so much from, that I became a television person. And even when I went to high school, I went to a high school in New York City called Stuyvesant High School.
Oh, you went to Stuyvesant,
Yes, in downtown Manhattan. I traveled every day on the train, but the school was very crowded, so I went. My session was the afternoon session, so I had all morning to be at home, and so since my house was less crowded at that time, people went out to work, I would either get together with my friends or I would watch documentaries on TV even then. So my valuation for TV was a lot more than entertainment. It was really my window on the expansiveness of life. And it's not so much that I was a special child or precocious in any way whatsoever, but I was fascinated by all the different places that a person could go to, and phenomenon that a person could
Yeah,
witness.
but you were particularly so as a young lad. It was just coming. You say you go and sit and watch the television. It was like magical. I remember because I felt exactly the same. We're roughly in the same age group, sort of in a general sense. So the coming of the television was something you'd have to go and sit in front of it and everything. And it was so. And again, your writing is so very good, and it's so. Informing what the real situation is. How about that? How do you feel about media? You've got 4 books now that you've put out. This is one. The Julian Time is Just in Time. That's a clever wordplay. Just in Time and everything. And what is your thought about the media? It's going very quickly now to where this exponential increasing of the capability of the internet. And are you a fan of the internet? Are you happy to have it here? The ability to get so much ability of information and so forth. And then also the multimedia, the trend toward multimedia away from literacy. We used to visit with Marshall McLuhan. I don't know if you were taken with Marshall McLuhan. And he wrote a book called The Gutenberg Galaxy, and talking about we're getting over the alphabet, the linear thinking of the alphabet into more electronic alphabet. And we just aired a program here we had done with Ray Kurzweil, who was a student of the digital development and seems to be an intrinsic part of the human condition. Now, what is your thought on that, particularly as it morphs not only into information technology, but it's morphing over into robotics now? And that's going to be huge.
I think that it's really important to understand that breakthroughs in technology are precious, and there is a definite upside and constructive side to that, but they also present a danger in the decreasing of value for human-to-human contact.
Okay,
I think to really understand that and to evaluate what capacity do we have at our present state of evolution and understanding and wisdom. What is our capacity to handle the amounts of information and repeated information and misinformation, and how capable are we to handle that wisely? I think it's interesting because, as you say, I've written 4 books, and each of these 4 books I've written for a different reason. Okay. The first book that I wrote because I had a lot of ideas and notes written down, and I was curious to see if I could compile those notes into something that was substantial and really to have a story woven through it. Yeah. So I wrote this poker story, and seemed to be able to put all these ideas through that, and I was pretty satisfied. And that book became a bestseller, which was a big surprise to me. Yeah. But then I didn't write anything again for a number of years, and then I had an idea that I would put some of my travels together in a book. So I wrote a book that included a lot of adventure travels, but it was fictional. And I allowed myself some a poetic license in developing that story. And I was very pleased with that, with the way the wisdom came through in that story. And then I followed that with writing really international monetary adventure taking place in Cuba, which is a place I've been to but had very little experience with. And that was more, I took that on as a personal challenge to see if I could write a spy story, because I like spy stories. And then the fourth one, the last one, was this Just in Time, which I'm really glad that you appreciate, because I'm proud of that accomplishment. I think that I've done well in combining humorous and interesting stories that are all accurate stories, all took place
Yeah.
with lessons behind them,
Yeah,
which is
so-
definitely challenging to do.
It sounds like some of the folk tales we had when we were young, because they all have a moral at the end, and the moral is presented with such literary style and so forth, and such deep and really beautiful humor that I just really congratulate you enormously on that. I'm going to have to take a little point of privilege here, and I'm sorry about it. We've had a lot of trouble here, and I'm going to have to ask my producer to let me know if she has the time. How much time?
8 minutes and 49 seconds.
To go. 8 minutes. You
Okay.
give me a signal. I've lost the time. So 8 minutes. We got 8 more minutes. So now we know what we can go with and everything. And again, I do congratulate it. Are you still do you still travel a lot, as you seem to have done in your life, or you were in the gambling game for a while, right?
I was, but that's been a lot of years.
You
Although
want to spell that one out, or should we just let that go? Maybe, you know.
Well, I'd say the gambling part of it I have let go, but I still I've been playing poker since I was a child.
Oh, really?
And
What do
I
you like? You
and I
like
still from time to time touch down into that world,
Yeah.
but infrequently. But I still do enjoy not only the challenge of playing, but I also do enjoy the camaraderie of the people that have that interest, because that generally wouldn't be considered a part of the population that I would get to know. But sitting at a poker table with 8 or 9 people, you get to know some people that you wouldn't otherwise get to know, and I do like that part of the sport.
Didn't you get one, if I'm not mistaken? If I am, you just stopped me short and everything. There was a thing where you were running tipsters or something at the track. You knew how to read the racing form, and you got involved. And I would say a point of personal privilege in my life. Well, I've had a very privileged, great family, and we had a woman who took care of us when we were young. And she had there was such devastation from the Depression, the Great Depression, and James Steinbeck and everything. She was there. She used to take care of us and everything like that. I was privileged, I guess, because I had a great family. My mother was the best mother in the history of the universe and everything. But she was there. She had been a wayward. She had been thrown off the land, and so she ended up in our house. 2 of the best sisters in the history of the world, a great dog. You know, I had a wonderful background, and she was one who gave me a little bit of balance, because she taught me some really important intellectual skills, like you know, how to shoot craps, and how to read the racing form, to brush up on your mathematical skills, all those fifths of a second. And you've been involved in some of that and so forth too, haven't you? You know. So
I have. It's been a while, but as I've said in my books, and certainly believe that learning different languages of aspects of life is really valuable if you want to pass on any wisdom or be able to understand how people live and think.
Yeah.
So not only languages in terms of French and Spanish and Italian, but language in terms of the language of working a farm, and the language of being able to play music, and the language of being able to play poker, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I have made a point to learn numerous languages and to be part of that, so that I don't feel that there are aspects of life, whether it be in nature and in the big cities, that I feel exclusive to. I feel inclusive of all those things. It's all part of the human experience.
What do you like, 5 stars, 7-card stud, or what? I mean, or draw poker, or what do you like? What are you playing these days, Justin?
We'll talk about that on another occasion.
On another occasion, without a camera rolling. Okay, I understand. I see you're getting used to knowing how to deal with the other kinds of things. Anyway, but it is amazing what's being able to be done with these multimedia things now. And
yes,
do you watch television, or let's say, do you depend upon multimedia in order to have access to the store of human knowledge? And do you think it might be good if we could get the cyber whizzes to maybe deal with the cacophony of the 7,000 languages that exist, through some sort of algorithmic way of translating the languages one into the other and get over the language divide? Do you think there's rumors that they may be working seriously on that major event or major achievement? Do you think that would be a good thing if we could get multimedia, which doesn't require the alphabet, and the language problem would be autonomically handled, so you'd have the story of human knowledge presented with graphics and all of that sort of thing, but the language would all be in
Harold,
English.
I think that could be a very interesting breakthrough and a very interesting exploration. For now, I have collected a number of books and songs and movies, all of which I value and all of which have some message, have some undercurrent of something that I think would be valuable for people. And I have included that list in the back of the book because I thought I have gotten great value from these creative expressions of different people, and I think that that possibility exists now. How that will expand with the change of language and technology, I'm not sure of that, but I know even now we have a wealth of knowledge, experience, and media that could, if people were exposed to it, it could be conceivably enriching.
I think you particularly liked the movie The Sting.
Yeah, I did like The Sting, but other movies as well,
right?
with some with spiritual messages and some with.
Gandalf was your hero, right, and your role model, right? Am I right, or are we off the reservation here? I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't be talking about it. There's nobody listening in on this anyway. Is there? Like nobody down at the station or anything? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But yeah. Okay, I'm making a joke, right? Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. You got a great sense of humor, and it informs everything you write, and you write so very, very well, and I thank you for that, for such a very, very well-led life. And I'm very pleased that I have had the book and everything like that, and pleased to have met you now. And maybe we should try to think about, in the time ahead, maybe this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship, I would like to suggest, between you and me.
I think that would be beautiful, and I'm very receptive to that.
Yeah, okay, very good. How much time? We got 2 minutes left. Okay. I'm sorry, the clock broke down. So anyway, and we had a lot of problems with this thing. I got to get our chops on this, doing more. Have you thought to make film yourself or not? Have you got into multimedia as a way of expression? You write very well. Often writing is the thing that makes the multimedia or the filmic expression really meaningful and so forth. Have you thought about trying to think of your hand in filmmaking or video or anything like that?
Well, every month or so, I speak to a number of people, and people come, and it's free and it's available, and it's in Northern California, and we video those meetings. So there have been numerous video representations of me speaking, and some of them have elements of adventure travel that we've gone and participated in, like that, and that's about as far as I've taken the production level of it.
You haven't thought of developing a film itself, like a feature film that brings in some of the experiences you've had, because you write so well, and very often the good writing is a sign of somebody who could be just as well a real good filmmaker. In even storytelling along the lines of, maybe you could get in touch with some people. Have you had some time in Hollywood with the Hollywood crowd?
No, I haven't.
Maybe you could find a few people that you could be cozying up to or something like that. And I just congratulate you enormously on such a very well-led life, and certainly the book. And I thank you for this meeting, and please do give my best to Paula and everyone in your corner. And I wish you all the very best, and thank you very much for such a very well-led life.
Okay.
Okie doke. Well, I guess that's it. Sorry, it ran down. We had some technical trouble. But okay, and I'm very happy to have made this connection with you here now then. Look forward to being in touch. Okie doke.